Welcome to another edition of the Bhandwagon Podcast. And I've said it before many times that one of the things that I wanted to do with the podcast was to kind of highlight key individuals in both in my work and in personal life, and kind of give them a platform and deserve kind of recognition, or definitely at least hear their sort of story. So one of the things that you all know is my kind of campaign, or my passion for working within the substance misuse field, and anything kind of attributed out of it. Let's just say public health. But when I joined, even though I was living in Handsworth and should have been kind of familiar with a lot of stuff, which I was, there was still an element of what I was doing, or my knowledge-wise, which was a little bit naive when I got into this kind of field where working with clients and working with this area. I still needed to know a lot of the knowledge in terms of both in street, in different kind of various settings, prisons or whatever. And my guest today is one of those guys who really gave me one of those educations. And he was one of the first ones where actually made time for me, and is definitely one of my go-to people when I need to know anything regarding just anything involved in substances. So that's good and bad. I'd like to just introduce to you Tony Mullaney. Welcome.
All right. Thanks, Ricky.
I ain't seen you for ages. How you been?
Yeah, I'm well. You know, it's been one of those weird couple of years, hasn't it, with kind of lockdown and stuff. Like, you know, yeah, I've recently changed jobs. So, as you know, I was working in the prison for 7 years previous up till like last month, and I've kind of started a new role now, working in the NHS still, but a totally different role, back in the kind of training arena. So, yeah, I'm okay. You know, carrying a bit of extra weight.
Yeah, I mean, like you ain't.
Okay.
Yeah, you ain't skipping any lunches.
Oh, yeah, you're true.
Yeah. So Tony, you know, like when we met, we were working in this kind of commissioned place where we were providing drug and alcohol training for a lot of third sector organizations like police officers, GPs, and things like that. From the Tony that I met there, would you believe that this Tony that I'm interviewing right now would be alive?
Yeah. Yeah, because I was kind of a volunteer in that sector anyway when I first met you, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Or was I professional? I can't remember whether we'd already started that charity. We were volunteering for the Drug and Alcohol Action Team. I was doing stuff with them from 2003. I think, what year did we meet?
2008. No, 2009.
2008. I was already in a professional role then, you know, delivering training and service user involvement stuff. So, yeah, you know, it's been a long journey, but I'm still here, still slugging along, you know, and over them years, I've worn several different hats in the drug and alcohol treatment arena, haven't I, you know?
Yeah. Tony, what was a young Tony like? I wanted to kind of start chronologically with your journey, really. And
okay. I was hard work, you know. As you know, and everyone else knows, because I've never made any secret of it, that I was a hardcore drug and alcohol user from a very early age. You know, the first drug I used was heroin. I ran away from home at 15. I was living on the streets of London, and the first drug I used was heroin. I injected it, you know, and my life then was a roller coaster of jails and institutions and prescribing services, and, you know, and I was an absolute nightmare to work with. You know, I wasn't one of these guys that engaged with treatment well. You know, I had a doctor, Dr. Judith Yates. She kind of prescribed through my whole career. You know, but I went to rehab several times. I was thrown out. You know, I had an air of arrogance around me, and I don't know why. You know, probably underpinned by low self-esteem. But yeah, I was hard work. You know,
so
I finally got myself drug and alcohol free. Sorry?
No. I was gonna kind of just relate back to when you first started, how you got introduced into the whole drug scene.
I was age 15, and I'd run away from home, and I was living on the streets of London. During the kind of punk rock era, because I'm in my 50s, you know, and it was kind of everyone around me was kind of doing it. They were all much older. I was only a young kid, you know, and I wanted to rebel, and I got into heroin, you know, first drug I used.
But 15 to run away from home is like, you know, that's no easy decision. What was leading up to that? What was the environment around it? Because I know you've had kind of like loads of experiences, and being in Birmingham around. What was it? What was the atmosphere like?
Not good at home, you know. I wasn't good at home. I didn't engage well at school, you know. I was on self-destruct mode from a very young age. And I saw using drugs, especially heroin, as my kind of act of rebellion. I grew up in a very religious, strict household from Belfast, Catholic, Irish descent, you know, and it was all very strict, and we were dragged to church on a Sunday morning, you know, and I was kind of like the black sheep of the family, the odd one out. That's how I felt. You know, the rest of my family were professionals. You know, my sister worked in banking. My other sister was a teacher. My younger brother was, the youngest ever manager at Rover, went on to manage at Bentley. My older brother was a manager in Birmingham City Council. And I was kind of like the lost boy of the family, you know. And, it was that rebellion led me down that road, you know, of self-destruction. If you want the truth, I never planned to live past 21.
You actually made that conscious decision to say,
yes. I thought, I'm going to just you know, and drugs gave me the escape I needed. It gave me the escape from my inner demons, if you like, and I just threw myself into it headlong. And no one had any hopes. That I'd overdosed twice by 19, where I had to be revived, you know, in hospital settings. I was chaotic, you know. I didn't care about myself. I would inject with water out of toilet bowls, out of puddles in the street. You know, I had no value on my own life.
So, from a method of choice in terms of like how you've been using heroin, it would be injecting, right?
Injected.
And so, like, one of the most common ways that people carry on whatever the method that someone gets taught to be using drugs is 90% not 90, I don't know exactly, but I know it's very, very high probability that that's how they carry on and teach others.
That's it, yes.
But in that culture then, was injecting the biggest thing that was happening at that time?
When I was young, there was only white heroin about. So it wasn't the Asian heroin hadn't started to come in, the South Asian heroin, so the Afghani, Iranian, Indian, Pakistani heroin hadn't come around, and it was all white heroin from the Golden Triangle, which doesn't smoke. Everyone injected. No one smoked heroin, you know. We used a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, like, you know, the dicanols and the palfiums. You know, when there wasn't much heroin about, we would black doctors for drugs, you know. And my first prison sentence was for obtaining drugs by deception. You know, so we would trawl around Birmingham or the whole West Midlands, doctors, and hustling doctors for opiate-based medications that really are not available anymore.
When you say hustle, what does hustle mean?
We would go in and we would, you know, invent a new name, and we would go into the doctor and give him a sob story, you know. What we would do, me and my friends would go into the local post office and we'd get a list of the local GPs. Then we would pick 10, take 5 each, and we would go and do those 5 doctors in the day. It was in the days when you could just walk in and say, I need to see the doctor. And we would go in and find until we found a sympathetic doctor. Sometimes we would see 10, 15 doctors every single day until you found one that would fall for your sob story, that, you know, your life was terrible and, you know, you needed help with some opiate-based medication to stop using street drugs. You know, we never kind of lied to them about pain or anything until we found sympathetic doctors. You know, and it all caught up with me when I was about 21, and I got 12 months in HMP Birmingham for 900 prescriptions of different kinds. So it was defrauding the NHS, obtaining drugs by deception, and possession of a Class A substance.
A pharmaceutical one.
Pharmaceuticals. It was mainly pharmaceuticals we were using in those days, and heroin was the stopgap between pharmaceutical drugs. You know, if we could find a bit of heroin, we would use it. You know, we would go to my first prescription was from a private doctor in Harley Street, when I was 16, when I was living in London, and we all did it. We would pay £45. The doctor would prescribe you a load of injection, and you would sell half of it because it was private, and then you would go to the pharmacy. They'd give you half on tick, and then you would go out, sell a bit of it, and go back and get the rest out. It was no NHS prescriptions.
And was that the environment what other users were doing? Because like for you to
in London, yes. In Birmingham, no. Birmingham, it was all doing like going and seeing, just finding a sympathetic doctor and a doctor prescribing for you.
And you talked about how it was more kind of the street names around it was China White because of, around because of the Golden Triangle. So when the Asian kind of let's say heroin came in, was that more Birmingham
1984?
84.
When the fall of the Shah of Iran, all the Iranians refugees came here, and they all brought that the Afghani heroin with them, and that was the explosion that happened, and it was around the time of the miners' strikes and poverty, and before there was, I think there was 200 people in the West Midlands in drug treatment when I was young. Birmingham alone by the 2000s had 7,000 people in treatment, didn't they? So it just kind of exploded. Exploded, and we've seen a lot more people. We was a very close-knit, tight-knit little kind of drug-using community in Birmingham. We knew everyone. We knew everybody, and everybody knew each other, and we would all help each other out and sort each other out, that kind of thing. But then by the 80s, it just blew up.
And then how did you come back to Birmingham then? Because if you're working in London, you had a good little operation there working.
What happened is there was a murder, and it scared us all. Where we were living in the squats in King's Cross, there was always violence and stuff, and someone got chopped to death there who was involved with our little kind of using kind of cohort, if you like. And we all just kind of left London, and one of the guys that was in our group, he's around now, he got life in prison. So we all kind of scampered off home and, scared. Young, we were 15, 16 years old, well, I was, and there was a couple of others around, late teens, early 20s, and then there was the older guys in their 30s. Yeah, but it was quite a very violent kind of environment to live in when we were living in London. And yeah, it got a bit scary. So a few of us came back to Birmingham and got involved with the drug user community here.
So kind of leading up to the murder, obviously a very extreme one. But what other how close and what were some of the kind of closer encounters that you were getting into at that time?
What do you mean closer?
I mean, like from the violence and crime side. If you're going there, I mean, you're a young lad, and obviously you've seen it from a murder point of view for you to make a whole change in your circumstances. Yeah. But there must have been kind of a build up towards that. And was there ever a point at that point?
Yeah, every day there was violence, because we were kind of like, we were punk rockers. So we had pink and red hair, and and we were targets of Afro-Caribbean youths, of skinheads, and so our life was constantly hit and run. Our life was constantly hit and run. Hell's Angels hated us. Teddy Boys hated us, and we kind of all lived in the same kind of squats. There was about 200 of us in London from all over the UK, and London guys as well. And we had to stick together, we every concert we went to ended in a bloodbath. It was just a really violent era,
And then, so the murder brought you back in here. And then, were you able to? When did you start? Did you ever think about operating and selling on yourself in Birmingham?
I've always sold drugs. I always sold drugs as a young man. Before I even picked up heroin, I was selling cannabis, but I didn't smoke it. Because of the cool bad boy element that I thought it carried with it, I would save up money and buy an ounce of hash, chop it up, and sell it to people. Before I didn't even use it, and it was just so that I belonged to something, because that's what I was searching for as a young man, But I always sold social supply in the early days. So, if I would go and hustle a doctor and he would give me 60 tablets of Diconol, I would sell 30 of them. So I always had my toe dipped in that pond. So I always sold drugs, and fast forward a few years, I was involved in drug smuggling and cannabis cultivation and
I'm getting to that.
again.
I'm getting to that part, yeah. So,
yeah, so
that
was my journey. I always had my toe dipped in the pond of selling something, you know. And during the rave era, when the raves first started, I was selling ecstasy and LSD paper in nightclubs and kind of rolling in money for a period of time.
And at peak, what was the most amount of money that you were earning?
The most amount I was earning. So on a Friday night, I could come out of a club with like £5,000 easy.
And how long ago was this?
This was in 1989, 90.
So $5,000 is a lot of anything.
Yeah. And we would stay in hotels on the weekend and have loads of girls around us, all that kind of crazy stuff. And you know, we got our toe dipped in the gangland pond, you know, in the 90s. And we were kind of living it big for some little kind of drug using guys, you know.
So did you get then when you went inside? Was that you know, for a lot of let's say that a lay person, for example, would get locked up, and that first experience would be going, you know, they've been rehabilitated through prison. Did that ever sort of come into your mind, or was there a period where you tried to straight away though?
No. Prison was no deterrent, you know. I mean, prison was a lot scarier in those days than it is now, you know. You went to prison and it was run with a kind of rod of iron, you know, and Birmingham prison was one of the scariest prisons in the whole country. My cellmate when I was in 1986, I think, my cellmate was killed. Was one of the guys that died under restraint in the HMP Birmingham care and separation unit, the block. Yeah, it was a scary place to be. But prison never offered me any kind of rehabilitation, no.
Did you meet anybody inside there? Anyone who's become infamous now or kind of networked in?
We had friends in there, you know. I never made any connections to further my career in there, you know. We would come across people we already knew in there, you know. I've done over the years several sentences. My first sentence was a short, sharp shock. They used to call it 12-week. And then I got 12 months for deceiving the NHS of Class A drugs. Yeah. And then I got a period of time, I got 4 years for conspiracy to supply cannabis and cultivation in the early 90s.
So how old were you then when you came out your first stint? And then how did, in terms of your
first stint, I was 15, 16.
Yeah. And then you did 12 months when you were what, 21, 22?
Early 20s.
Early 20. So then, you know,
maybe 21.
So when you started this journey and your drug education, how then did you kind of take it to the next level, from going into being a regional supplier and user to be going to the international points?
Right. The guys that I grew cannabis with were kind of old hippies, and they were already on the India trail. So they were already on the India trail, you know, and when I come out of prison, we stopped cultivating cannabis in Birmingham. Well, they did, because I was younger, in my 20s. They were in their like 40s and 50s, and we all got done together, 6 of us. So we all got 4 years. Usually for cultivating cannabis, you get 12 months, but we all got 4 years because it was a conspiracy. They had us all together, and they had photographs of us and stuff. It scared them guys, didn't scare me, you know. I was a crazy kid on self-destruct, so, you know, it didn't scare me, you know. But they then went to India. They took me to India with them. They introduced me to a few people. Before you know it, I've got loads of contacts in India. We were in Kashmir, in the Himalayas, and for the next 10 years, I spent lying on beaches in Goa, you know, selling a bit of drugs here and there and smuggling drugs back here, you know.
So what was the actual operation like?
Oh, mate.
I'm going to get everything out of you, Tony. Don't worry.
So, pre 9/11, this is, so you got to remember, there was a firm of people in Goa and that I got introduced to and kind of built a relationship with, and they had the baggage handlers paid off at Delhi, Goa, and Bombay Airport. So if you say you had a kilo of heroin or 12 kilos of hashish, you would then get that professionally put into a bag. You would hand this to one guy who would then hand it. He would drive down a road somewhere. This is what they told me. They would drop it off at a bus stop, and a member of the airport staff would just pick the bag up. So you never carried a bag on a plane in India. So your bag would automatically get taken through customs. So it wouldn't go through any. The dogs wouldn't go on it. It wouldn't go through any scanning or anything like that. The bag would go on the plane. Then what happened is you knew your bag. So your plane would land at Birmingham, Gatwick, Manchester. So what we would do was we'd fly back on, not on a scheduled flight, we'd fly back on a tourist flight like a TUI flight or a Thompson or a Thomas Cook or Monarch Airline. So it would be around 2-week tourists who are not really suspected of drug smuggling. Yeah. So then we would just watch for our bag, let it go around a few times, get a few people out in front of you, and kamikaze run it. We used to call it, pick the bag up and just walk out. And walk out.
And then how much were you kind of like, was there any close calls?
Oh, I've been caught in India twice with considerable amounts of drugs. You know, I got caught on the train coming from the Himalayas from Delhi to Goa with 12 kilos of cannabis and half a kilo of heroin, Pakistani white heroin. You know,
how did you get what?
Always have a slush fund.
So
yeah. So always make sure you're carrying £1,000 in cash.
Yeah, but like I'm just saying it in the politest way, Tony. Yeah, like at that time, like everyone around you is obviously from South Asian kind of background. Yeah. And like I've been to India, you know it yourself that you'd actually stand out. So like you'd be the first person they would go after. So did anything that.
This is not true, because if you get on that train from Delhi to Goa, there's going to be 200 white people on that train.
Oh, on that train?
Yeah. So, you know, wherever you... Oh, mate, I could tell you some stories from up there.
Go ahead. I could tell you some stories. Go for it. I remember
once, right, we used to go up to a place called... We used to stay in a place called Manikaram. Of the Himalayas, right at it's the end of the road of the Parvati Valley. The Parvati Valley is where all the hash, all the plants are grown and the hash is made. And we would go up there, and then we would walk to a place called Pulga, which was 14 kilometers away from Manikaram. Pulga is where you go and get, you know. Then the next stop is Mullaney. The further you go up that trail, the better quality of hash, and the more expensive it'll be, you know. But still a pittance compared to this country. And we used to get Sherpas to carry out, say we go on by 20 kilo between three of us. My mates, the older guys, I'd have Sherpas to carry it through the jungle so you didn't carry nothing. Yeah? Then you would meet them in Manikaram and then you would divvy up all your hash and, you know, and then put it in bags and then take it on your journey. But we was walking back one day, and a little policeman jumped out from behind a rock, the end of the road, and he went, "Stop," you know, and he went, "Passport," and I went, "Oh, passport, ne baba," you know, and he's gone, "Oh, big problem for you." And I said, "What do you mean big problem for me?" He said, "Oh, big problem for you, no passport." He says, "Come, we go to police station. I hope you like prison food."
And did you try bribing him?
No, before I had the chance, he looked over my shoulder and went, "You Jaldi, shoot us away." And I looked behind me, and 4 guys with dreadlocks come around the corner with big backpacks on, and he was on them. He straight away, he thought, these are better, because we had bags are nothing with us, you know what I mean? These are better candidates. What they like to do is get you back to your hotel room, because they're going to find a little bit of something, and a little bit of something leads to their bribe. So he spotted these Norwegians or Scandinavian guys, and he thought, I'll have them. So what happens is we go to the hotel, and then the next day, the hotel owner, you know what I mean, who was in on this whole deal thing, he said to me, "Do you want to come and have a smoke with me and my friends?" And me and my mate said, yeah. So he takes us down this back alley, and he bangs on this door, and this door opens. We go inside. It's really dark. Who's sitting there? The policeman is sitting there with a big pile of hash, smoking a pipe for chillum. And he just looks at me and gives me a wink. Yeah, so the policeman had taken all the hash off these Norwegians or Scandinavian type guys, took all their money, and the next night I'm sitting in the same room as this policeman smoking hash, you know what I mean? And he's like got a big smile on his face and he keeps giving us the wink, like, I remember you from yesterday, mate.
How much would it go for if you're per kilo from there?
So a kilo of hash, this is charas, so the finest, the best hash in the world. Yeah. A kilo up there would cost you £200. Yeah. 200 quid. No, the kilo would cost about £100 in them days. And it went for 3,500 in the UK.
So you
work that out, you got 10 kg.
So you obviously you became experienced and knowing these routes, and then when you went onto the train and you got caught by that guy, what happened there?
Oh God, I got into an altercation with the train guard because I'd been hustled over my ticket, and it wasn't going to my. I got the train from Delhi to Goa, and I bought it in a travel agent. Everyone's on the hustle, so they sold me it to the border of Goa. So there was another 300 miles or something I needed to go on this train, and I was trying to reason with this train guard, and we got into an altercation, and I got abusive to him, and he was abusive to me, and then he marched off and come back with a policeman, and the policeman then went, passport, paperwork, what's in the bag, and he opened the bag up, and there was kilos and kilos of hash in there. There was a big parcel of heroin, white heroin, and he just went, "You're big problem for you, sir, big problem for you. Delhi prison for you, sir." And I just kind of got my bum bag and I opened it up, and there was £1,000 in cash in there, in 20 and £50 notes. And I just went, "Baba, for you, bakshish." And he kind of nodded at me, took my money, and I says, "I keep the charas." And he went, "My fucking charas," and took my drugs and went. That was it. That was the end of it. So what I had to do is I got to Goa and I got some more money, and I got back on the next train and went back up the Himalayas and restocked.
So obviously money wasn't an issue then, because you had the system. So once it had, and then it would go back into your flight pattern and do the kamikaze run on the other side.
Yep.
Because I remember when I spoke to you, in the early 2000s, like 2010 to 11, is when just before kind of the legal highs and the MPS kind of started. Yeah, but there was a big rise in kind of like GBL and some of the rehypnols and stuff. And you were telling me that you used to be aware it was sold as kind of rose water back, and that's how it was being smuggled.
Oh no, we're talking about ketamine.
Ketamine, yes, ketamine.
Ketamine. You could buy the ketamine in the local pharmacy. You could go and say, "Give me 100 vials of ketamine," and it would come in a vial, like you see in the vets, with powder in the bottom, and and you could just, what the people used to do, they'd get the ketamine, and it was before obviously all the 9/11 and stuff, so you could take water on the plane. So what they would do is just fill bottles with water and then dilute tons and tons and tons and tons of ketamine into the water, and just carry the water through customs. It's taste free and smell free. That's why people were smuggling tons on the New Age Travelers sites. All of their ketamine came from India, smuggled in water, and then was reconstituted here. What you do is you put it in a saucepan, boil it down, evaporate all the water off, and then you're left with a sludge at the bottom. You let that sludge dry and then bash it up, and it turns into powder. It wasn't my thing, but I've seen it happen all around me. Because in Goa, party drugs were big: ecstasy, cocaine, amphetamines. Because it was the dance culture was there. So a lot of people would use K as well, but a lot of people smuggled K back, and it was a lot of the New Age travelers, or crusties, what we used to call them. They would bring back tons and tons and tons of K, and also diazepam by the thousand. You could go in any pharmacy and buy diazepam.
were you getting kind of like marked, like back in the UK, like they were noticing you're traveling or anything? Did you get any indication? And how long was this going on for, this operation?
10 years.
It was 10 years. And then what happened?
Then, what happened? I came back from India in 2002, and I met a girl who was doing the same kind of things, and we used to grow together and all that stuff. And we had a baby, and we had this young baby, you know, and I was still mixed up in selling drugs and that kind of stuff. And the child was born addicted, and it was all problematic, you know. But I'd also started dipping my toe in the pond of volunteering in drug services. I've been to rehab a couple of times, and even though I was still stuck in the world of making money and doing all that chaotic stuff, I still had my eye on recovery. You know, I started to my using started to become painful. You know, it hadn't been painful for a number of years. You know, it started to become painful, and it started to become tiresome, and it became Groundhog Day, and you know, and going to India kind of saved my life a little bit, you know, because I didn't use much drugs when I was there. Bizarrely, you know, I was still caught up in the transaction and the lying on beaches and you know, dating tourist girls and all that kind of stuff. But you know, my drug using, you know, when I use chaotically. You know, my life sounds quite glamorous in a lot of beach island, flying around the world. But the true nature of my using, when I use, is on my own, desperate, injecting myself in the groin, crying to myself, all that kind of stuff. You know, once that door closes on the outside world, and I'm using drugs, I'm in a desperate, horrible, dark place. You know, and as the years went on, my using got darker and darker and darker. You know, I ended up having this baby, and I was actually drug free at the time, but I was still growing cannabis, so I was still selling bits and bobs here and there, you know. And we had this baby, and I kind of had a relapse, and the relapse led to a kind of moment of realization. I can't do this anymore.
A couple of things I just want to touch back on before we move on there. One, for kind of people kind of new into it, you said about injecting to the groin. Can you just go and just go a little bit in detail why people go injected in the groin?
So, back when I was a young man, we were injecting in our hands and arms and stuff like that. And we were injecting a lot of pharmaceutical drug tablets. So our veins went very fast. So our veins, we got thrombosis in our arms. So our veins shrunk away and hardened. So we couldn't use them anymore. And you've got a vein in your groin. It's one of the biggest veins in your body, called the femoral vein. And it's quite a dangerous place to use, but it's kind of easy access. Once you've done it a couple of times, you get a little bit of scar tissue, and it becomes, then you just kind of pop a needle through it, and it becomes a very easy, viable way of injecting, getting your drugs on board, you know. And I did that for 20 years.
And what's some of the risks that can happen in the
groin? The risks that can happen? Well, I nearly lost my leg in 1992 after coming out of prison. I had an internal bleed. I punctured holes in my artery. So my artery was bleeding internally into my leg, and I got something called compartment syndrome, which means my leg compartmentized, my thigh did. So all the blood I was leaking. The blood went, obviously decayed within my body. It was leaking that much blood in there, the body couldn't clear it. So your own body's own resources, and it kind of turned into a humongous abscess, which kind of like cut off the blood supply to my leg. And I was in hospital for 6 months, 42 surgeries on my one leg. You know, they told my parents I wouldn't live through it, and I wouldn't. They wanted to cut my leg off and make me comfortable, because I wouldn't live out the week, because I scream in the hospital down. You know, that was my consequence. You know, and I still have them consequences today. I live my life in pain that I've learned to manage, and I get leg ulcers and lots of other issues in my legs. Injecting in your groin, you know, you can lose if you inject into the artery, you know, you can lose your leg that way.
And there's holes as well, isn't there? Some people can have holes. Some people can have holes, gaping holes, that abscesses.
Yeah, gaping holes, you know. I've still got scar tissue today, and I haven't used for like coming on 18 years. also there's a nerve there, and if you the one side of the vein there's the artery, and the other side of the vein there's the nerve, and if you hit the nerve, you can lose function in your leg and your foot, and there's lots of risks involved with it. And because people inject a lot of crack and heroin nowadays, it's destroying their veins quicker. Because I was on an injectable prescription for 20 years, I think it kept, I did quite well. People, the damage I did in 20 years, people are doing in 2.
Right.
So people are doing, 20 years worth of damage in 2 years now, with injecting crack cocaine and citric acid, using too much citric. Citric is the drug, the substance that's used to kind of break down the drugs into an injectable source again, because the brown heroin that comes from Asia is not really meant for injecting. But if you mix it with citric acid, that will make it turn it back into a salt, and then it's able to be injected. And crack cocaine, it can really solidify. The people are cooking crack cocaine. It's meant to be injected with cold water, and people are cooking it up with their heroin, and then it's kind of congealing back in their veins, blocking veins up, giving people deep vein thrombosis, which then can lead to pulmonary embolisms, and a lot of nasty complications.
And also that is because of the stigma around it. If people don't want to have kind of injecting sites on their arms, the kind of groin is a very concealed place as well.
Yeah. Certain areas of the West Midlands, for instance, have a big groin injecting culture. Sandwell, for instance, most people inject in their groin when they run out of options. Mm. In Sandwell, there was a survey done years ago in drug services, and a lot of people in Sandwell would go straight to the groin, because it was cultural. It's what their friends did,
And so that's
and as a result of doing that,
behavior.
no one sees it.
Yeah.
The only person that sees it is the person that sees you naked.
And this is, and that's why like harm reduction is so important, that you get,
absolutely,
if people are doing that, they get taught in the correct way and the safer way. So you could do that. So this is the argument that that's used quite often. I mean, earlier on in our conversation, you were talking about, you were using kind of puddle water and etc. Was there any risks of bloodborne viruses or anything like that coming to you? I
caught a bloodborne virus probably the first time I used.
The first time?
Yeah, because I was 15. I was at the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as needle exchange, and I sat in a squat in London, and about 20 people used the same syringe before me.
Right.
We're quite lucky that HIV wasn't prevalent at that time, and I remember becoming ill shortly after, pains in my right side and stuff, and I went to hospital, and they said I had a viral hepatitis they hadn't identified yet. They called it hepatitis not A, not B. And it wasn't until I was in hospital in 1992 that the nurse informed me that you've got hepatitis C. And I said, well, I knew I had something called non-A, non-B.
Well, it's only going to be C.
It's going to be C.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I picked up a bloodborne virus very early.
And what was the impact and the complications of it even to this day?
The impact of having Hep C on myself, it's asymptomatic for a lot of people until they're 20, 30 years down the line. But the longer you have hepatitis C for, the more damage it does. I work in Hep C now. That's my role.
Yeah.
The longer you have Hep C for, it's kind of like we call it the silent killer, because it's killing you all the time and you don't know it. It's destroying your liver. So hepatitis C, hepa means liver. It's Greek for liver. And itis means inflammation. So hepatitis just means inflamed liver. The virus attacks your liver. And as it attacks your liver, it causes fibrosis, which is like mild scarring. The mild scarring, as it progresses, turns to cirrhosis, which is the part of your liver that dies away. And then the end stage of that is liver cancer. So, having this virus in your system, you may not know it for a long, long time. That's why we push hepatitis C testing at every opportunity for people in treatment now. Get it identified, get it treated, and get it cured.
And there's a very high proportion of people who have been injecting drugs and that who have had hepatitis C or definitely suffering the complications from it.
50% of all injecting drug users currently have hepatitis C.
And that was higher. Like, as
it was higher back then, yeah.
Yeah.
Needle exchange has reduced that down. I'd say out of my peer group, every single one of us had it.
And it's it's really important around the needle exchange, around having the clean needles, because not everybody is using those needles for kind of like heroin or anything like that. But a lot of people are using steroids or getting into the kind of the fitness industry or
performance enhancing drugs. Yeah. Tanning.
Yep. So anybody going for fake tans? The what was it called? We used to do this.
Melanotan.
Yeah, melanotan, and there was melanotan 2 as well, weren't there? When it was the permanent bleaching of the skin, the newer models. Yeah. Well, I'm going back in my brain now. We used to deliver training together for everybody, kind of like working out what's going on. But you also like one of the things that you kind of bumped into celebs and stuff along the way. Is that fair to say? And you've got one of the trademarks that you've got is actually on the side of your head. Is that right?
What, tattoo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to go into this story or not?
What? Just say it again.
I said, are you allowed to go into the story of the tattoo? Who tattooed your head?
Tattoo? Oh God! I worked in a tattooist when I was very young as well. You know, before my drug use kind of like made it not viable for me to even hold a job down. You know, and I was at a tattoo convention in London, and one of the world's top tattooists was there, and I was in with the tattoo field, you know, I knew lots of people, and I was talking to him, and I pointed to this design in the book, and I said, I like the look of that. And he went, lie down there, and I'll put it on your head. And I didn't really want a tattoo on my head, but being young and easily influenced, I lay down, he shaved my head, and he put this tattoo on me, you know.
Yeah, and who did it?
A guy called, it was Ed Hardy's partner at the time, a guy called Leo Zulueta.
So, you know, in the 2000s, mid 2000s, everyone was wearing Ed Hardy stuff.
Ed Hardy.
Yeah, and you had that design on your head before anyone knew about it.
Yeah, because some of the designs on the Ed Hardy shirts were done by Leo as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, Ed Hardy was the most famous tattooist in the world. Ed Hardy came over and was spending time with us. And his partner was Leo, who was the world's first to do tribal tattooing. So it's Ed Hardy's partner, and you know, and we were there, and I was talking to Ed and pointing to these stuff in the books, and it was Ed that said, like put it on his head, you know, and mental.
Yeah, because when we met, it used to be more like short hair. Now you're obviously losing it a little bit, but it's on the side. Yeah, it's on the side. You can just see the little bit of it. Yeah, the Ed. Yeah, there you go. Oh yeah, that was always a good pub story. So then, so when we met, I remember when you were having sort of your ankle problems were the main kind of
mate.
When I saw you when we kind of got together.
Leg ulcers.
Yeah, the leg ulcers and stuff from it. So like in your work now, do you try and, I know you go back to Thailand pretty often. Did you venture down when you were down in India and the and then the Himalayas? Did you go over to Thailand at that point?
Yes.
And what was the culture like
Thailand
there?
Was that a little break, if you like?
That was your break from the work.
From India, you know, we'd be lying on the beach in India. I first went to kind of like a gangster wedding over there. There were some gangsters in Goa who kind of run all that smuggling routes and stuff. And one of them said, "My pal's getting married in Pattaya. Do you want to come?" Me and my pal just went, "Yeah, we'll come." And we flew over to Pattaya, to Bangkok, and then down to Pattaya. The gangster wedding was a bit much for us, so kind of the next morning we're lying on the beach with a hangover, and I said, "Should we do one?" And he went, "Yeah." And we just got on the bus and went back to Bangkok, and then traveled to Chiang Mai up in the mountains, and then over to Koh Samui in the islands and Koh Phangan. And you know, before the big full moon parties were in full flow, there was like the full moon party was like 200 hippies from Goa kind of dancing on the beach with a little speaker, you know, and smoked yaba and used heroin there, and you know,
Yaba's their
Bangkok
version
with no flip flops on in the 2 a.m. looking for more yaba. And
And Yaba's their version of crystal meth, isn't it? What their terminology.
Yaba it means crazy medicine. That's what it translates as. And Yaba was methamphetamine coming from Burma, methamphetamine tablets mixed with caffeine. So they were sold in, I didn't see it because in the 70s, the whole of the Thai workforce worked on Yaba. They were paid in Yaba. So you get your daily wages and 2 Yaba tablets for tomorrow. You know,
and that was also to get them for driving at long distance driving.
Productivity. It was sold in petrol stations. So where you filled up, there was a box on the counter with Yaba and a little packet. You know, it wasn't until the mid 2000s that it became the crazy drug of use, and then the government clamped down on it and executed loads of drug dealers and stuff. And there was all YouTube videos of people being pulled out of bars and shot in the head, and similar to what they were doing in the Philippines recently.
Were you ever? I mean, I was just coming on to the kind of punishment. Like, you were almost like one of the first waves of the UK kind of that market and the routes being set up, or probably the second gen, I would say.
Second gen.
Were you ever worried about some of the punishment that if you got caught? I mean, you were living such dicey, or were you still having the same mentality of thinking that I'm still not going to make it past 21?
Yeah. Well, the parameters moved, didn't they? One, I never thought I would get clean or drug free. I knew I was going to die of using drugs at some point. And my ideology was, I'm just going to live now, live fast, die young, And if I go to prison, I'll go to prison. If I get killed, I get killed. I was like that. We ended up in Kashmir in the middle of a war, They tried to blow up an Air India 747 on the runway when we were there, We planned to stay 2 weeks, but literally it was scary, and we stayed there 3 days, and went and had a look at the gun markets, and it was just crazy there, And you could hear machine gun fire at night, and in the distance you'd hear big explosions going off, and so we kind of sort out danger in a way. Like, we were warned by the Home Office not to go into Kashmir, and we thought, that sounds good. The Home Office is telling us not to go. We're going in,
And did you ever kind of think about in terms of what the ramifications were, or what I mean is, like, every time as your story develops and it's getting there, you can feel it, and it's raising the ante every single time. Did you? What were you starting to entertain, like, different drugs or different routes, or expanding your little empire that you had?
No, because we were quite happy. We were making a lot of money. We were making a lot of money for very little effort, and a lot of my job involved lying on the beach for 6 months.
Yeah.
I was quite happy with what I was doing. Then I'd come back to the UK and I'd put a crop of cannabis on. 8 weeks later, there's £10,000. So then I would go back to India with that. So, it was, we would take cocaine and ecstasy to India with us.
And how did you smuggle that from the UK to there?
Inside.
But inside the...
Inside.
Yeah, so inside is not of a suitcase, but of the human body.
Inside the body, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we could go into detail. I think I won't. But were you ever nervous that if you got a stomachache?
Back as I can remember, no.
I remember once reading a stat that every bag of heroin inside prison has gone through at least 6 people's
bottoms.
Yeah. Would you say? Yeah, that's about right. Okay, so you become a dad, and you still had a little bit of kind of reverberations of your past life coming in. Did they ever get to the point where the money is going down, you're not earning the amount of money that you were before, and the pull to go back into the past life?
During the end of my using, obviously I left the family home and was flat out again, and I had a doctor supply me with all the drugs I needed to get by day to day. nobody had anything to do with me. I kind of reached the end of the road, and I didn't see anyone for like 9 months, and I still had a considerable amount of money in the bank, and I just potted along and desperately trying to get back into rehab. And the doctor who I was with at that time was trying to go through every avenue to get me back into rehab. But I'd been several times before, and I'd never really engaged well, and was quite obstructive and obnoxious to the funders, and they were just saying no. But then I had a meeting with Mike Quinn, who was one of the commissioners at that time. Dr. Yates pulled some strings, my doctor, and got me a meeting with Mike, who I'd known because I'd volunteered at the DAP. I spoke at conferences and stuff. And he just took one look at me and he went, "Oh my God, what's happened to you?" And I just said, "I'm a mess. I'm a mess, Mike," And he went, "Right, where do you want to go tomorrow?" And he did a referral on the spot. And within a week, I was in rehab again, And all the other times in rehab, I messed about and wanted to be the guy who wanted to talk about this kind of stuff. I wanted to tell people how cool I was and the things I got up to. And I wasn't really bothered about, because I didn't believe what they told me. I thought I had a problem with two substances, crack and heroin. And I didn't want to stop smoking weed. I didn't want to stop drinking. I didn't want to stop having a little sniff occasionally, And for people like me, I think we had to close the door fully. And that's what they told me in rehab, and I didn't believe them. And every time I left rehab, what they prophesied for my life came true. I'd relapsed. I'd have a little drink. I'd have a little spliff. And literally within a day or two, I'd have a needle in my vein again, So going back to rehab for the final time in 2004, I was the student. I did exactly what I was told. I read every book they told me to read. I would listen to every tape they told me to listen to about recovery, And by the end of my treatment, I was the house leader and looked up to, and I became the treatment guy rather than the prison guy or the gang guy or the money guy,
And that's where I kind of met you when you were in that phase where you were the kind of the font of knowledge, basically, and what works and what doesn't work.
I remember, right, going back to when I was in hospital in 1992 when I was really ill. A doctor came into me and they were trying to mess around with my medication, and I said to him, and he's gone about morphine and methadone and all this, and I said, "Listen, I've gone, morphine has a life of 6 hours. Methadone has a life of 12 hours plus a 12-hour half-life." And I started talking clinically to him. And, when I was flat out, and he went mad. And he went, "Do you know what your problem is? You know effing know too much," and threw my chart across the room and stormed out. And the nurses were all giggling, you know what I mean? I'd pissed off the consultant, I made it my business to know stuff, even when I was that chaotic guy. I would read books. I would, study pharmacopoeias. I would look at all the pharmaceutical stuff. I'd look at interactions, So I've always been a bit of a geek, So I was the drug geek, and that's why I love learning and I love knowing about this.
There's a film to be made on your life. I'm convinced of it, or at least a book. It's gonna happen.
When I left my last job, they bought me a book to write my book in.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. So I just want to go on to the fact we met in during that time, and your help and support was invaluable from that bit. And then you moved on into kind of working into prisons.
Yeah.
What was the prison environment like when you went in there, and did it trigger anything compared to when you went back when you went in?
Right, I'd worked in a really nice service, Park House, which I was part of the development of, over the years, and it was a really nice, nurturing team with the NHS. We lost our contract to the current provider, and I was kind of pushed out. So the trust I worked for had the prison contract, so a job became available there. I interviewed and got the job. I was quite discriminated against when I first got there, Everyone thought I'd be a corrupt member of staff. They thought because I was an ex-prisoner and an ex-drug user, I was the first person to be employed in HMP Birmingham who'd been in HMP Birmingham. I was the first person to be a criminal with a criminal record and a drug using record to work in HMP Birmingham, And I was kind of bullied, if you like, not by the prisoners. Love me because I speak a clinical language, but I also speak their language. Prisoners love me, loved it. You know, he could put a group on, one of the other workers, no one would turn up. He put my group on, 12 people come and they finish the course, you know, because I know how to interact with them. I know how to capture them. You know, staff were horrible. I hated working there for the first year or two, you know, until I kind of cemented my place within that team and became integral to it, you know, but it was horrible, yeah, you know. Dirty looks from the staff, you know, sniping about me, you know, all that kind of stuff.
And was that...
It was kind of nostalgic.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at.
It was nostalgic. I used to walk onto G-Wing and have a look at my cell, you know. I'd walk on and my cell was G36. That was my cell for 6 months before I was shipped out in 1990. And yeah, I used to walk on there, kind of look quite nostalgically think there was my cell, man. And then I would think about my cellmate that didn't come out of HMB Birmingham alive, you know, at that time.
And is it, in terms of kind of like the drugs and gangs within there, has anything changed?
It's calmed down a bit. I was there during the riots in 2016, you know, and if you walked onto particularly the gang wings at that time, you know, like C Wing and stuff, you know, I got stuck in the middle of some really extreme violence and you know, I was thinking, how am I going to get out of this? You know, I was the only member of staff in the middle of a massive gang fight between Handsworth gangs and stuff, and people being hit with chair legs with nails in, and you carry a whistle in prison, and I blew the whistle. No officers came, just more prisoners, you know, which left me in a really tricky situation, you know, and I'm trying to get out through people, and people are pushing me and stuff, saying, yo, why are you blowing that whistle? Yo, what are you doing that for? You know.
And was that because? And then was it because you had
a relationship? Came.
No, but did you buy yourself time because of the relationship you had with prisoners, or if you were a different kind of person?
Right. From then on, when I walked onto them gang wings, I'd open the gate, walk on, and they'd give you the evil look, and I go, "Yes, you all right, mate? You know what I mean? What's up, man? How you doing today?" You know, you had to put on a level of bravado, and then I could walk onto those wings quite easily, and you know, I'd walk on the wing and I'd go, yes, how you doing, boss? You're cool, you are, boss. You know, you ain't like them other ones, you know, because you have to kind of build a certain level of rapport, you know. And I've got gold teeth. I grew up in Borsal Heath, you know. I'm covered in tattoos, you know. I'm not your regular kind of guy, you know what I mean. And it would be a starting point, and I always dress dead smart, you know, and. People would say, "Oh, you used to come from the road, you did, didn't you?" You know, that kind of stuff. And I say, "Yeah, I come from the road, but I changed my life around, man, and I'm doing this now." "Yeah, you're all right, you are, boss."
Was there did you see somebody who looked like yourself when you joined in there, and did you go out and try and give that intervention?
Yes, many times, you know. I would try and plant seeds of recovery. Right. You get a head against a brick wall with most prisoners. Yeah. But you can see desperation in some guys' eyes. And for me, that desperation is a sign that they're motivated to do maybe looking at some change for themselves, you know. And we've got a guy who I got on my groups you know, who's doing really well. We've got another guy who's just in the second year of his his law degree, you know, who was a B-winger, flat out burglar, you know. You get those guys, don't you? The ones you see a little bit of promise, a little bit of desperation, you know, in your eyes, and you can plant the seeds that recovery is possible, you know. And I didn't broadcast from the rooftops in there that I was in recovery myself, except to the ones who needed to hear it.
And do you think it's getting, I mean, like the environment's getting, you said it's a little bit calmer now within,
yeah.
Let's say that, but as the scene, is the violence and kind of, is that escalating? Is it worse now?
Prison's violent. HMB Birmingham is a very violent prison. You know, it come very low down the HMIP scorecard, didn't it? You know, we had a new governor. It was G4S lost their contract, and the Home Office retook the prison. Since the new governor's come in, he's implemented new searching procedures, and every prisoner now is body scanned. Yeah, there is searching every day on the gate coming in. So the level of drug use in the prison has fell through the floor. Self-harm went up a little bit. COVID has helped the prison implement a lot of changes. Whereas the prisoners run the prison before, now the kind of prisoners taken back a little bit more control. I don't think it'll ever go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, but, the prison is a lot calmer. There's a lot less violence, a lot less drug use, probably due to supply.
So the supply, there was always a strong sort of supply. It used to come from external people coming into the prisons, and
prisoners coming in on license recalls were coming packed, they call it, and prison officers and guest staff like NHS staff, education staff, it all came in through those routes. Drones were a big route for a time.
How would they work? So they would just see him just going over the wall and bang.
Throwovers still happen.
Pigeon. I know it used to be packed with pigeon, like dead pigeons or pigeons. Tennis balls.
Pigeons and tennis balls. Yeah. Oranges packed with it, and they use like that stick thing you throw the ball for the dog.
Yeah.
yeah. They'd use them to wang it over the wall, and then there was the drone era when drones were coming in every night, but then they've kind of implemented stuff to stop that. All the windows now have external bars, like cages over the windows, so they can't get anything in from them. Yeah, so every time there's something new comes, the prison react and try and stop that route, don't they? And currently every prisoner now is body scanned on the way in. So there's an X-ray machine in reception. So the prisoners are not bringing it in anymore. And there's searching of staff. Obviously, there's still going to be a little element coming in, isn't there? Because you can't search everyone everywhere. But it's a lot calmer place to work.
So in terms of you like your future now, in terms of how far you see, and you reflect it back, what when you're looking about your kind of your life, what do you kind of come up with?
What do you mean?
I mean, like, you've gone through such an adventurous sort of time in your life. You've gone through many almost different lives that you've gone through, different kind of decades. Like, when you look back on it now, what do you come up with?
I wouldn't change a thing. My life has been an adventure from as far back as I can remember. It led me to some very painful and dark places, but those painful and dark places have forged me into the individual I am today, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Some of the physical damage I've done to my legs, maybe I'd love to not have that, but I accept that it's there. And I've done some mad stuff during my life, done some crazy things, and getting into recovery and going to rehab and accessing the support after leaving rehab's allowed me to kind of totally change my life around and influence a lot of people, I still volunteer for Narcotics Anonymous. I still run meetings every Thursday night, I'm in a new role of work.
I just want to touch on that. It's a little bit controversial, but I just want to get your opinion on it. So you've got many people who go from like, I can't use abstinence, and then you got the harm reduction, and you've been very fair in terms of knowing the value of both. Where do you kind of stand on it? Are we in a place within recovery that there's a home for both and everybody gets on with everyone?
Absolutely, I think so. I see a lot of bitterness and a lot of sniping and a lot of comments aimed at from the harm reduction community towards the recovery community, because I've had my foot firmly planted in both camps. I'm a harm reductionist in my own life, and I'm an abstentionist. So I live my life the abstinence way via a 12-step model.
Yeah.
That don't mean you have to. Yeah. There's a lot of other avenues into recovery, and whatever one fits you, let's support you in doing it. For me, Narcotics Anonymous and the 12-step model has helped. I tried every way of getting drug-free, getting sober, getting clean, whatever name you want to call it that's politically correct at the moment. You know, where I come from, we call it clean. Where I work, we call it drug-free. You know, if you choose a different path that works for you, that's fine. You know, some people can put down heroin and crack and carry on having a little drink and a smoke of weed. Yeah. If you can do that, fair play. You've reduced your harm levels. You've reduced the impact that's causing you damage. Yeah. For me, every time I put a drink in me, I ended up having a smoke of something. Every time I had a smoke of something, I ended up putting a needle in myself. You know? So narcotics taught me a new way of life. You know, and as a result of that, I sit here today alive and well and employed in a senior role. You know, if that don't work for you, that's fine. Find a way that works. You know, if you want to go to smart recovery and learn some CBT based ways of changing the way you think around drugs, good for you. Get on with it. You know, and then go and live your life. And if you want to smoke a bit of weed and it's not killing you, fair play. If you want to have a little drink and you're not drinking that it destroys your liver, fair play. For me, that was kind of not an option at the time. And now I don't miss it. I was at a festival yesterday, backstage, with all the big stars and everything, you know, and everyone around me is drinking, smoking weed, some people sniffing cocaine, you know. That doesn't have to be my reality. You know, I can still go out and enjoy my life. You know, and leave it up a little bit and not get high, not lead me to that place of desperation again.
I'm going to bring it to a close, but I ask all my guests when I do the podcast is there a bandwagon that you want to kind of jump on or jump off? Or is there anything else that you want to get off your chest? This is kind of like the space for you to go into it.
Oh, no, I'd just like to say where I work now, really. I work for an amazing part of the NHS, and it's about bloodborne viruses, Hep C. I'm part of the Hep See You Later team, it's called. And if you look on Twitter, it's I think it's a really cool, catchy name. And we're going around and we're kind of like, we're kind of assisting all the UK services in micro-elimination of Hep C. The World Health Organization has vowed to rid the world of hepatitis C by 2030. The UK Public Health has set a target for 2015, and we're the kind of team that performance manages everyone's data to make sure that everyone who comes into service is tested for Hep C. Anyone who tests positive for Hep C is then given a PCR timely, you know, and then anyone who wants access to life-saving and cure treatment, DAAs, the new direct-acting antivirals, is given it. So we kind of go around the country. I'm the training officer for that team. I'm the training lead. So I go around the country training other teams, you know, and just getting across the importance of testing everyone for Hep C. You know, everyone who's tested positive for Hep C is kind of breaking down the myth that the new treatment is not the horrendous one that I went through, you know. Get everyone tested, treated, and cured. You know, I think that's a good message to leave with.
Tony, just want to say, like, I'm guessing everyone listening or watching in could understand why I was just fascinated and just listened to you constantly, and I learned so much from you. So this is like my opportunity publicly to say a massive thank you. And you know, when you've come to the conferences that I put on, I really appreciated it, and you know, it means a lot.
Thank you, Ricky. It's been a pleasure.
All right, bro. I'll catch up with you soon.
All right, nice one, mate. All right, bye-bye.